Hey everyone, welcome back. It's good to be with you today, Daryl.
And with you, Rachel.
How are you doing today?
Pretty well, thank you.
I'm looking forward to spring.
Oh, yes.
It's a gloomy, rainy one today.
Yes.
But spring is in the air.
Spring will come.
And Easter is coming.
It is. It is.
We celebrated Palm Sunday this past Sunday, and in a moment we'll take you through what Palm Sunday represents and set you up for discussion and conversation, which is the point of these videos. But first, I do have a couple things I wanted to share with you. One is Good Friday is coming up, and Good Friday is special this year because we are part of kind of like a citywide Good Friday celebration with other churches. And we're at Westside Church, now called Center Church, for services with First Baptist and Center Church and Coastal and a few other churches as well. And so this reflects a heart for unity of the church in Vancouver. And we're looking forward to the Good Friday services that will be there 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and 1 p.m. And there'll be childcare in the first two services. So want to invite you to join us for that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that our next upcoming prayer and worship night is happening in North Van on April 23rd. And these nights have been so beautiful. They really came kind of on the heels of our 21 days of prayer this year. We just wanted to create more environments of prayer and worship. And this gathering is not just for those who typically attend our North Van congregation. It's an all-site church event that you're invited to. Just happened to be hosted this one in North Van. So that's happening on the 23rd.
Very
all right.
Good.
It is Palm Sunday, and we are just days away from Easter. And so we're in this Holy Week now. And on Sunday, we talked about Palm Sunday. And so, Daryl, I'm just wondering if you can kind of bring us into the text and bring us into this week as we have discussions this week in small group.
Okay, very good. Well, Palm Sunday is the stories told by all four gospel writers. Mm-hmm. And they emphasize that Jesus comes into Jerusalem riding on a donkey, on a foal of a donkey, on which no one had ever ridden before. And they emphasized that Jesus had orchestrated this. He had sent the disciples out to find this donkey. And there's these codes that Jesus apparently set up. If someone objects, they're supposed to say the Lord has need of it. So Jesus then gets on the donkey and rides up the hill from Bethany, and then if you've ever been there, there's this ridge, and you come over and you see the city of Jerusalem and all of its glory. At that time, it would have had the big temple that Herod the Great built. And then crowds began to gather, and they began to shout, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna to the Son of David." Different gospel writers have remember the different parts of that chant. But it's all then built around, quoting out of Zechariah chapter 9, "Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." And then when you read the Zechariah text, you realize that it's a picture of a king who comes in humility to bring peace. Yes. And that's what Jesus is then coming in to do for the city.
And these crowds are laying their coats and palm branches, and it's like a royal gesture, as if to say the king is coming. And as we know, it's a different kind of king than that they were not expecting, and a king who brings peace and is humble and comes in on a donkey. And so this is more than just a warm welcome. This is a royal kind of entrance into Jerusalem. And so that's kind of the text that we'll invite you to read tonight, or one of the texts that we'll invite you to read tonight. It's the kind of basis of Palm Sunday, is Jesus going into Jerusalem.
Yeah, and the palm branches, of course, would have signaled the kind of king they think he is. That would have taken back to the Maccabean period, when Judas Maccabees has triumphed over the invasion from Rome, and then they celebrate this triumphal victory that was more militaristic. And so Jesus is having to signal that he's not that kind of king, which explains why, as I read it, once Jesus comes into the city, to the shouts of Hosanna, the crowds disappear. Once he gets in the city, they're not there, because I think they began to say, oops, maybe this isn't the king that we thought.
So take us a little bit into what you talked about this Sunday.
Well, as I mentioned, all four gospel writers do mention, do tell the Palm Sunday story, and do emphasize this quote out of Zechariah, but only John records Jesus' own interpretation of the event. And John does that in John chapter 12, verses 20 and following. And Jesus' interpretation of the event is precipitated by these Greeks who've come to visit Jerusalem during the Passover. And we know that that happened. People who were aware of the joy of Passover in Jerusalem, so you wanted to be there. And these Greeks then come to Philip, one of the disciples, and they say, "Sir, we want to see Jesus." And I think it means not only we want to see him, can we hang out with him, but we want to understand who he is and what makes him tick. So this is a great moment for Jesus to interpret, to reveal more of himself and to interpret what he meant by this event. And at the heart of what Jesus says is, he quotes this, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit." And so I would imagine these Greeks who would have been enamored with greatness. I mean, think Philip, by the way, they go to Philip because he has a Greek name. Philip's probably named after Philip of Macedon, who is the father of Alexander the Great. So the Greeks would have come with this sense of great. And so they want to meet this new great person. They've heard of the greatness of Jesus of Nazareth coming into Jerusalem. And so Jesus now interprets what great means.
And what does it mean?
You die for the sake of others, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies. A grain of wheat only has its meaning by dying. I mean, it's stunning that Jesus would say this. The meaning of my life now is that I'm going to give it away for the sake of the world. And unless I do, I live alone. But if I die like a grain of wheat, then I'll bear much fruit. I wish John had told us more of the response of these Greeks. Would they have walked away and thought this was really stupid, naive? What do you mean? Or were they, by the power of the Holy Spirit, brought into this great reversal of values? That if you want to be great, this is how you be great. And that's why Jesus says, those who love their life in this world lose it. Those who hate their life in this world gain it. And he's echoing what he's been telling the disciples for 3 years. The greatest is the servant of all. The first is the last, all those great reversals. So I wonder if the Greeks then left Jerusalem with a whole different idea of greatness. So that, I think, is Jesus' essential interpretation. And that's why he then says, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men to myself. And then lifted up in the Gospel of John means lifted up on the pole, lifted up on the cross. And that somehow in this great reversal of greatness, he draws people. And we know that throughout church history. What drew cultures, what transformed nations was the recognition of the true nature of greatness. Empires that lived with that false idea of greatness collapsed under the weight of their own arrogance. But those civilizations that caught this great insight into greatness were truly great.
So good. A passage that we'll also invite you to read in light of these themes is the hymn in Philippians that you reference as well. Yes. And it just does paint this stunning picture of this king that no one expected, reversing what they anticipated and saying, this is greatness, is serving in humility. And so we'll invite you to read that. And I was thinking this week, Daryl, as we're approaching Easter, we've been in the study of James as a church, and likely you've had conversations in small group, if you've been with us, around how to live. And James is calling us to look at our lives. And he's a practical guy, and he's an intense guy. And the way he's calling us to live is hard. Being humble in our speech, being humble in the ways we serve, in our wisdom, and it's hard. And I think it's good to step back and zoom out a little bit, and in these weeks thinking about our Lord serving ultimately by going to the cross and laying down his life. We can't forget that the one we're responding to ultimately went the furthest and gave the most. And he should have been served, but he served others. And he should have been obeyed, but he obeyed the will of his Father ultimately to the cross. And so it's good to kind of put ourselves in that narrative and to remember ultimately who we're responding to, who we're trying to be like. And it's a powerful image.
You made me think about, I've wondered when James actually became a believer in his brother. We know from the Gospels that his whole family wondered about him, and they thought he was nuts sometimes. We don't know which members of the family thought that, and they even thought he might have even been demon-possessed. Mm-hmm. But there's a shift for James, and I'm just wondering, given the thrust of the book of James on humility and on going down, whether or not this Palm Sunday might have been one of those moments James would have witnessed this.
Right.
Wait a minute. And then began to hear what Jesus had been saying all along, and then it was so deeply ingrained in him that he wrote this book that calls us to the hard way. I don't know.
Cool. Very cool. We'll have some discussion questions for you tonight to prompt discussion. And if you listened to Chris's sermon this week, he spoke in North Van and at Fairview. We invite you to share what stood out for you during his message. We'll have some discussion questions about that too in small groups. But bless you, and happy Easter.
Bless you.